For 8 afternoons in a row, a small brown and white goat escaped from the neglected pasture behind the old Willow Creek Elementary School and began digging at exactly the same patch of ground beside the rear playground fence. At first, school janitor Martin Keller treated it as one more irritating problem in a building full of irritating problems. Willow Creek had been closed for almost 3 years after the county consolidated its rural elementary schools, and Martin was one of only 2 maintenance employees still responsible for the property. Most days his work consisted of checking pipes, mowing grass, keeping vandals out, and making sure winter storms did not turn a forgotten building into an expensive insurance claim. The goat belonged to Eleanor Price, an 80-year-old widow whose small hobby farm bordered the school property. His name was Rusty, although Martin privately thought the animal deserved something less friendly. Rusty climbed fences, opened latches with his mouth, chewed plastic buckets, and had once spent half an afternoon standing on the hood of Martin's county maintenance truck. So when the goat squeezed beneath a damaged section of wire and began scraping dirt beside the abandoned school, Martin assumed he was searching for roots. The next day, Rusty returned. Then the next. Martin filled the hole twice. Rusty dug it open again. On the 8th afternoon, after rain softened the soil, the goat pawed so aggressively that something metallic appeared beneath several inches of dirt. Martin climbed through the fence, pulled Rusty away, and knelt beside the hole. He expected an old pipe or piece of playground equipment. Instead, he uncovered the curved blue corner of a metal lunchbox. It was the kind children had carried 20 years earlier, scratched and rusted around the hinges, with faded yellow stars painted across the lid. A small combination lock held it shut. Martin almost threw it into the maintenance cart with the other trash until he noticed a name written on the underside in black permanent marker. Laura Bennett, grade 5. Martin knew the name. Everyone in Willow Creek knew it. Laura Bennett had been 11 years old when she disappeared after leaving that school in October 2004. She had never been found. Martin remained crouched in the wet grass longer than he later admitted. Rusty stood beside him, chewing something that might once have been a worksheet or might simply have been a piece of old paper blown from somewhere else. Behind them, Willow Creek Elementary rose in complete silence, a one-story brick building with boarded lower windows, a faded blue entrance canopy, and playground equipment slowly surrendering to weather. It was hard to look at the school without remembering children there, even after 3 empty years. Martin had worked in the district for 27 years. In 2004, he had been 31 and assigned mostly to the middle school, but he occasionally helped at Willow Creek when the regular custodian was absent. He remembered Laura's disappearance because it changed the town. Before that week, parents let children ride bicycles alone down county roads, walk from the school to nearby farms, and disappear into wooded lots until dinner. After Laura vanished, everything became supervised. Doors were locked earlier. Parents waited at bus stops. Teachers stopped assuming children who stayed late had simply arranged rides with someone else. Laura became part of the town's geography. There was the church where volunteers organized the first search, the gas station where her photograph remained taped to the register for nearly a decade, the creek where divers searched twice, the gravel road where somebody thought they saw her walking, and of course Willow Creek Elementary, where she had last been seen alive shortly after 4 o'clock on a cold Thursday afternoon. Martin took out his phone and photographed the lunchbox exactly where it lay. He did not attempt the lock. Then he called the sheriff's office. Deputy Claire Monroe arrived first, followed 30 minutes later by Detective Adam Pierce from the county cold case unit. Adam was 54 and had been a young patrol deputy when Laura disappeared. Martin recognized him before Adam recognized Martin. "You were here in 2004, Martin said. Adam looked at the school, then at the lunchbox still partially buried. "Yeah." His voice changed. "Unfortunately." They taped off the patch of ground and brought in a forensic technician. Rusty was finally caught by Eleanor Price, who arrived in rubber boots carrying a bucket of grain and apologized as though her goat had damaged the school landscaping rather than uncovered evidence from a 22-year-old disappearance. "He's been digging there all week," Eleanor said. Adam looked sharply at Martin. "All week?" Martin explained. Eleanor added that Rusty had escaped several times after she moved 2 goats into the rear pasture earlier that month. "He doesn't normally dig like that unless he smells something or thinks there are roots." Adam asked whether the goat could have dragged the lunchbox there. Martin shook his head. It was buried, several inches at least. The forensic technician confirmed the surrounding soil appeared compacted and old, though determining exactly when the object had been placed there would require excavation. The lunchbox was lifted with the surrounding dirt preserved as carefully as possible. Beneath it, investigators discovered fragments of degraded plastic, several rusted nails, and part of what appeared to be an old canvas strap. Nothing else obvious. The lunchbox was opened the following morning at the evidence facility. The combination lock had corroded internally and was cut. Inside were objects so ordinary that Martin later said they disturbed him more than anything dramatic could have. 2 colored pencils, a small plastic horse figurine, a friendship bracelet made of blue and white thread, a school photograph of a girl named Megan Lewis, 3 folded sheets of notebook paper, and a cheap disposable camera. There was no food, no money, no obvious explanation for why an 11-year-old had locked these objects inside a lunchbox and buried them behind her school. One folded paper held a childish list titled, "Things for Our Secret Club." Another was a hand-drawn map of the school grounds showing the playground, baseball field, drainage ditch, and an X beside a row of trees behind the rear fence. The third page was different. It had been folded 4 times and written in darker ink. "Megan says Mr. C knows about our place. Don't tell him where the box is. He keeps asking what we saw near the shed." Beneath that sentence, Laura had written 2 initials, TC, for investigators who had spent decades with a case defined by absence. The note was enormous. The original investigation had concluded Laura left school around 4:05 p.m. on October 14, 2004. She normally rode bus 12, but that afternoon she stayed behind for an art club meeting. Her mother, Diane Bennett, planned to pick her up at 4:30. When Diane arrived, Laura was not inside. The art teacher said Laura had left the classroom approximately 15 minutes earlier, telling another student her mother was waiting outside. Diane had not arrived yet. No staff member remembered seeing Laura get into a vehicle. A 5th-grade classmate thought she saw Laura walking behind the gym, but she had never been certain. Search dogs followed Laura's scent from the rear of the school toward the playground and then into the grassy area where the school property bordered an old farm lane. From there, contamination from hundreds of searchers made the trail difficult. Police searched houses, barns, wells, woodland, drainage pipes, and the nearby creek. Registered offenders and known violent offenders were questioned. Laura's parents were investigated and cleared. Her father had been working 60 miles away. Her mother was recorded at a pharmacy minutes before driving to the school. The leading theory became that Laura accepted a ride from somebody she knew. No physical evidence ever supported it. Over the years, investigators considered a substitute teacher, a delivery driver, a custodian, 2 parents, and a man arrested in another state for abducting a child. Nothing linked any of them to Laura. Now the initials TC reopened an almost forgotten thread. In 2004, Willow Creek Elementary employed an assistant groundskeeper named Thomas Carver. Carver was 38 then. He cut grass, repaired fences, cleared snow, and helped maintain a small equipment shed near the baseball field. He was interviewed twice after Laura vanished because he worked on the property that afternoon. Carver told investigators he left at 3:50 to repair a mower at the district garage. Paperwork appeared to support him. He had no serious criminal record, only a 10-year-old disorderly conduct citation. Several employees described him as quiet but harmless. By the second week, detectives focused elsewhere. Adam Pierce pulled the old interview tapes. Thomas Carver was now 60. He still lived in the county. More interesting was the phrase in Laura's note, "What we saw near the shed." The old equipment shed had been demolished when Willow Creek Elementary expanded its playground in 2008. The rear grounds were regraded, soil was moved, new fencing installed. Investigators had searched the shed in 2004, but found nothing. There had been fuel cans, gardening tools, a mower, bags of fertilizer, and a small workbench. Nothing suspicious enough to preserve. Adam located Megan Lewis, the girl whose school photograph had been inside the lunchbox. Megan was 32 now, married, living in Cincinnati, and working as a physical therapist. When detectives contacted her, she remembered Laura immediately but initially remembered nothing about the buried box. Then Adam showed her photographs. Megan began crying. "We buried that." "When?" "That year, 5th grade. Why? It was our time capsule. Who was in the club? Me, Laura, Jasmine Cole, and sometimes Natalie. Why did Laura write about Mr. C? Megan went silent. I don't know. Adam waited. I forgot about this. What? The shed. Megan closed her eyes. We used to hide behind it during recess. There was a gap between the back wall and some bushes. Teachers couldn't see us unless they walked all the way around. What did you see? Megan rubbed her hands together. A truck. What truck? Mr. Carver's, I think. Doing what? Nothing. It was just there when it wasn't supposed to be. Explain, Megan tried. Children notice patterns without understanding why adults care about them. Thomas Carver usually parked a white district pickup near the main maintenance entrance. But several times Laura and Megan saw a different vehicle, a dark green van, behind the equipment shed during school hours. Carver was sometimes near it. Once another man was with him. The girls invented stories that the men were spies or criminals because children make mysteries from ordinary things. One afternoon they crept closer and saw several cardboard boxes being moved from the shed into the van. What was in the boxes? Adam asked. I don't know. Did Laura? I don't think so. Why would Carver ask what you saw? Megan's expression changed. He caught us. She remembered Carver stepping around the shed while the girls crouched behind shrubs. He became angry and asked what they were doing. Laura laughed and said they were investigating. According to Megan, Carver told them the area was dangerous, ordered them back to the playground, and later asked Laura twice whether she had been snooping around the maintenance stuff again. At the time, it felt like an adult scolding children. 22 years later, it sounded different. What happened the day Laura disappeared? Adam asked. Megan looked down. I wasn't at art club. Did Laura tell you she planned to go behind the school? No. Did she say anything about Mr. Carver? No. Then Megan remembered one more thing. The secret club had buried 2 containers. The lunchbox was not the main time capsule. It was a decoy. The real box was a plastic food container wrapped in trash bags and buried closer to the old equipment shed. Why 2? Laura thought if somebody found one, we'd still have another. Adam asked whether the second box contained anything connected to Carver. Megan hesitated. I think there was a license plate number. That changed everything again. The girls had once copied the license plate of the green van because they were playing detective. Laura wrote it on a card and placed it inside their evidence box. If that container survived, police might be able to identify the vehicle. The problem was that the entire area had been changed in 2008. Ground-penetrating radar and excavation began behind the closed school 3 days later. The work attracted local attention immediately. Reporters arrived after somebody leaked that the original disappearance site was being searched again. Diane Bennett, now 63, stood behind the police barrier watching excavators remove thin layers of soil. She had spent more than 2 decades learning how not to interpret every new search as hope. Martin saw that in her face. She thanked him for calling police but said almost nothing else. Rusty became a problem again because Eleanor's fencing failed for the 3rd time that month. The goat appeared near the police vehicles and had to be removed before he walked into the excavation. Martin caught him by the collar. You have done enough. Rusty attempted to eat his jacket. On the 2nd day of excavation, a technician found degraded black plastic approximately 30 feet from the original location. Beneath it was the broken corner of a translucent food container. Inside were marbles, stickers, a keychain, 2 candy wrappers preserved mostly as foil, another friendship bracelet, and a small index card. The card contained a plate number, MJF 417. State Motor Vehicle Archives still held records from 2004. The plate had belonged to a 1994 dark green Ford Econoline registered to Patrick Carver, Thomas Carver's older brother. Patrick died in 2016. His history was not clean. In the late 1990s, he had convictions for receiving stolen property and burglary. He later ran a small scrap and resale business out of a warehouse 12 miles from Willow Creek. Police had never connected him to Laura because his name never appeared in the original investigation. Thomas had never mentioned his brother's van. Investigators reconstructed something else. During 2003 and 2004, rural schools in 3 counties reported thefts of computers, projectors, maintenance tools, copper wiring, and unopened supply shipments. Some incidents involved facilities that Thomas Carver had visited through a district maintenance sharing program. None of the thefts had been solved together. They were treated as separate property crimes. The suspicion now was that Thomas may have been using his access to school grounds to move stolen equipment through Willow Creek's maintenance shed before Patrick resold it. Laura and Megan may have seen them. That still did not prove Thomas had harmed Laura. Police interviewed him. Thomas Carver opened his door and appeared irritated rather than surprised. "I already went through this 20 years ago." Detective Pierce placed a photograph of the green van on the table. Thomas stared at it. "That was Patrick's." "We know." "Then why are you asking me?" "Your brother's van was repeatedly behind Willow Creek Elementary." Thomas shrugged. "He picked me up sometimes." "Why did two 11-year-old girls write down the license plate?" "How should I know?" "Why did Laura Bennett write that you were asking what they saw near the shed?" Thomas leaned back. "You're trusting the imagination of a kid from 22 years ago?" "We're asking you." "I told them to stay away from equipment." "Did you move stolen property through that shed?" "No." "Did Patrick?" "No." "Was Patrick at the school on October 14th? "No." "How do you know?" "Because he wasn't." Adam noticed the answer. "You didn't ask which year." Thomas realized it too late. The interview continued for 3 hours. He denied involvement. Then investigators examined the old district maintenance log, supposedly proving Thomas left Willow Creek at 3:50 on the day Laura disappeared. The form was signed by a supervisor named Gerald Mills. Gerald was 81 and living in assisted care, but mentally sharp. When detectives showed him the document, he frowned. "I didn't fill that out." "Your signature is here." "Looks like mine." "Could somebody have copied it?" Gerald nodded. Tom had access to blank forms. "Do you remember October 14th, 2004? "No." "Do you remember Tom repairing a mower that afternoon?" "No." Then Gerald added, "Tom repaired his own timesheets all the time." "What does that mean?" "He'd forget to sign out, then fill it later." The alibi that had seemed documented in 2004 was no longer reliable. Police searched Thomas Carver's current property under a warrant based on the theft investigation and newly developed evidence. Most objects from 2004 were long gone. His garage contained dozens of old tools, nothing immediately useful. Then an investigator found several boxes belonging to Patrick Carver that Thomas had inherited after his brother's death. Inside were business papers, vehicle registrations, old photographs, and a spiral notebook listing items sold through Patrick's scrap operation: computers, copper, power tools, school equipment. Dates matched several unsolved thefts. One entry stood apart. October 14th, Will, no pickup. Tom problem. Investigators did not know what it meant. Thomas's middle name was William. Patrick sometimes called him Will. Could Will refer to Thomas? Adam brought the notebook into the second interview. Thomas looked at the line. For almost a minute, he said nothing. Then he requested an attorney. The case became active enough that state police joined. They searched former property associated with Patrick, the warehouse, a farmhouse sold years earlier, rented storage units identified through historical records, and an abandoned quarry where Patrick had once stored scrap vehicles. The warehouse had been renovated. The farmhouse produced nothing. At the quarry, however, investigators found evidence that changed the direction of the case. An old concrete storage building stood near the back of the property. Patrick had rented it from 2001 through 2006. Inside, behind a false wall added some time before the current owner purchased the site, police found remnants of stolen school equipment. Serial numbers matched several 2003 theft reports. The Carver brothers had almost certainly been involved in property crime, but Laura was still missing. Detectives needed something connecting her disappearance to the operation. That came from an object in the buried lunchbox everyone initially dismissed: the disposable camera. The film had spent more than 2 decades underground. Moisture had entered the housing, and technicians warned nothing might survive. A specialist laboratory managed to recover partial images from 7 exposures. Most were exactly what anyone would expect from 11-year-old girls. Megan making a face, Laura standing on the playground, a blurry photograph of a teacher, shoes, the sky. Then frame 6 appeared. It showed the back of the maintenance shed. In the distance was Patrick's green van. Beside it stood Thomas, Another man was partially visible. Frame 7 was badly damaged, but it showed the open rear doors of the van. Several boxes were inside, and behind the boxes was something investigators enlarged repeatedly: a blue plastic storage tote with white lettering. The lettering belonged to Willow Creek School District. It was enough to establish that the girls had actually photographed the stolen property operation. Laura may have known that. Thomas may have known she had a camera. Megan was interviewed again. Did Tom ever see the camera? She closed her eyes. I think Laura took his picture once. Did he react? He tried to take it. Did he get it? No. Laura ran. Did he threaten her? I don't remember. Think carefully. Megan began crying. He said he'd get her in trouble. For what? For being where we weren't allowed. That was not a murder threat, but to an 11-year-old it might have been enough reason to hide the camera inside a lockbox. Investigators developed a likely sequence. Laura attended art club on October 14th. Sometime around 4, she left the classroom. She may have intended to retrieve or check the hidden box behind the school before her mother arrived. Thomas may have still been on the property, despite claiming he had left. Patrick's notebook suggested a planned pickup did not occur because of a Tom problem. But what problem? Detectives looked at historical weather, employee logs, telephone records, and witness statements. One overlooked statement came from a school cook named Barbara Hayes. In 2004, Barbara told police she saw a maintenance truck leaving the rear lot around 4:20. Investigators assumed she meant the district truck. Now, age 74, Barbara remembered one additional detail. It had something over the back. What? A tarp. Color? Gray or blue. Did school trucks normally carry tarps? Sometimes. Did you see the driver? No. Historical fleet records showed Thomas had been assigned a white Chevrolet maintenance pickup that year. Patrick's van was green. If Thomas left around 4:20 in the district truck, his 350 garage alibi was false. Police searched archive photographs from the original investigation. One image showed the rear school parking area at 7:10 that night. Thomas's assigned truck was not present. Investigators had assumed he had taken it to the district garage. Garage records did not document its arrival. The following morning, it was back at Willow Creek. Nobody had ever tested it. 22 years had passed. The truck had been sold at auction in 2010. A state vehicle database traced it through 3 owners to a landscaping company in Kentucky. Investigators located it. Time, weather, repairs, and multiple owners made forensic hopes almost non-existent. Yet beneath the plastic bedliner was a small area sealed from regular cleaning. Technicians recovered old biological material. Most came from animals, soil, and countless people. One sample produced a partial mitochondrial DNA profile consistent with the maternal line of Laura Bennett. It was not the kind of definitive identification modern juries saw on television. It could not prove Laura herself had been inside the truck. But combined with everything else, it mattered. Thomas Carver was arrested on charges related to the theft operation, while detectives continued building the disappearance case. For 5 days he said nothing. Then Patrick's widow provided police with something Thomas did not know existed. Before Patrick died, he had given her an envelope and told her to destroy it. She never did. Inside were several handwritten pages. Patrick described years of stealing equipment with Thomas, and one paragraph referred to the school girl. Tom came to me after dark saying the Bennett kid had seen too much and he had scared her bad. He said she fell. He wanted me to help. I told him no, but I helped anyway because he was my brother. Worst thing I ever did. There was no location, no description of what fell meant, but it destroyed Thomas's remaining room to deny that Laura's disappearance involved him. His attorney began negotiating. Eventually, Thomas agreed to tell investigators where Laura was in exchange for prosecutors removing the possibility of the harshest available sentence and allowing him to plead to a combination of homicide, kidnapping-related, theft, and evidence tampering charges consistent with what the evidence could prove after 22 years. His account was simple and terrible precisely because there was nothing elaborate about it. Laura went behind the school to check the buried box. Thomas saw her. He had recently realized she and Megan had photographed him and Patrick. He demanded the camera. Laura denied having it. He accused her of stealing maintenance property and told her he would take her to the principal. Laura tried to run. Thomas grabbed her backpack. She pulled away. Near the old drainage ditch, Laura stumbled down the embankment and struck her head against a concrete culvert. Thomas said she initially remained conscious. That detail haunted Adam Pierce more than anything else. Instead of calling an ambulance, Thomas panicked. Laura knew about the thefts. She knew Patrick's van. She could tell people he had grabbed her. Thomas convinced himself that if police arrived, his life would collapse. So he placed the injured child in the maintenance truck. He drove away. Patrick helped him later. The brothers took Laura to an abandoned section of Patrick's quarry property. Thomas insisted she died before they reached it. Prosecutors believed there were reasons to doubt parts of his version, but could no longer establish exactly when death occurred. He showed investigators the location. Search teams excavated an overgrown section beneath a row of young trees near the quarry's northern boundary. Diane Bennett waited at home. She had spent 22 years imagining every possible ending. At 4:16 p.m., Adam called her. They had found human remains. Dental records confirmed Laura 2 days later. The town that had spent decades asking where Laura went finally received an answer nobody truly wanted. There was a funeral, not a memorial service, not another anniversary gathering beneath missing person posters. A funeral. Laura was buried beside her father, who had died 7 years earlier without learning what happened to his daughter. Megan attended, so did Martin. Eleanor Price came too, though nobody expected her. She sat quietly near the back. Afterward, Diane found her. "You own the goat?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "Unfortunately." Diane laughed. It surprised both women. Then Diane began crying. Eleanor hugged her. The media discovered Rusty almost immediately. The headlines were inevitable. "Goat digs up. Clue that solves 22-year missing child case. Curious goat leads janitor to buried evidence. Animal's strange behavior breaks cold case." Martin hated them. Rusty had not solved the case. He did not know Laura. He did not understand lunchboxes. The most likely explanation was completely ordinary. The soil behind the school had recently been disturbed by rain and erosion. Roots had grown around the metal container. Goats paw and dig for vegetation, minerals, scents, and objects that interest them. Rusty happened to keep returning to the same patch. But Martin also refused to pretend the animal did not matter. He had walked past that ground hundreds of times. Maintenance crews had mowed around it. Children had played feet away for years. Police searched the property in 2004. Construction crews regraded portions of the field in 2008. Still the lunchbox remained. Then a goat scratched the right few inches of soil. That was enough. Megan visited Willow Creek several months later before the county demolished the school. Martin met her there. She asked to see where the lunchbox had been found. The excavation had been filled. Grass seed covered the dirt. "It was here?" "About here." Megan stood silently. "I remember burying it." Martin waited. "We thought we were incredibly clever." "You were 11. We put rocks over it so nobody would find it." "Apparently you were pretty good at it." Megan smiled sadly. "Too good." She looked toward the empty school. "I spent 22 years wondering whether I remembered everything wrong." "What do you mean?" "Adults kept asking me questions after Laura disappeared. I remembered the van. Then nothing came from it, so I started thinking maybe I made it up." Martin understood. Children learn quickly when adults treat uncertainty like error. "The camera says you didn't." Megan nodded. "I wish I had told them more." "You told them what you remembered." "I forgot about the second box." "You were 11. Megan looked at him. "You sound like my therapist." "I'm considerably cheaper." She laughed. Before leaving, she walked around the abandoned playground one last time. Willow Creek Elementary was demolished that summer. The district preserved a few bricks for former students who requested them. Diane Bennett asked for none. "I don't need the building," she told Adam. She did ask for Laura's lunchbox once the trial ended. The court eventually released it. The metal was badly corroded. One hinge barely worked. The yellow stars had faded almost completely. Inside, Diane kept only 2 original items: the plastic horse and the friendship bracelet. The disposable camera remained preserved separately because of its importance to the investigation. Diane placed the lunchbox on a shelf in Laura's old bedroom. She did not turn the room into a shrine. It had changed over the years, but one wall still held a photograph of Laura laughing beside her father. Underneath the photograph was the blue lunchbox. Thomas Carver received a lengthy prison sentence. In court, he apologized. Diane listened without expression. When reporters asked afterward whether she accepted his apology, she gave the only answer she ever offered publicly. An apology can belong to him. Forgiveness belongs to me. She did not explain whether she had given it. Patrick was already dead and could never be prosecuted, but authorities formally closed several old-school theft cases after confirming the brothers' involvement. The case also forced the district to review how maintenance access had been documented in older schools. There was no suggestion modern procedures could erase what happened decades earlier, but officials changed background reviews, vehicle records, key tracking, and staff sign-out systems. Martin retired 2 years later. On his final day, Eleanor walked Rusty down the road. The goat was older now and slightly heavier. "You brought him to say goodbye?" "He escaped." "Of course he did." Rusty immediately tried to climb onto Martin's landscaping trailer. Martin grabbed his collar. "You're the reason I spent 2 years talking to journalists." Rusty chewed the sleeve of his jacket. Eleanor laughed. "Ungrateful celebrity." Someone had mailed Rusty a small plaque after the story became national news. Eleanor hung it on the barn. It read, "Rusty, Professional Excavation Services." Martin objected because the goat had no professional standards. The sign remained. Years passed. The sensational version of the story gradually replaced the complicated one. People online claimed Rusty dug up Laura's remains. False. Others said he carried the lunchbox to the janitor. False. Some versions said Laura had vanished only months earlier. Wrong by more than 2 decades. Martin stopped correcting strangers unless they genuinely cared about what happened. When they did, he told the full version. A goat exposed a corner of a lunchbox. Inside was a note. The note returned investigators to Thomas Carver. A photograph confirmed an old childhood memory. A second buried box provided a license plate. A forgotten maintenance document failed under scrutiny. A disposable camera preserved evidence. An old truck still contained a trace. A dead man's confession supported what investigators were already building. And finally, the man who had spent 22 years believing the truth remained buried agreed to show them where Laura was. No single clue solved the case. That was not how real investigations worked. It was a chain. Rusty merely pulled on the first exposed link. One autumn afternoon, Martin visited Eleanor's property. He was 63 now and enjoying retirement less than he had advertised. Rusty stood beside the fence. "Still alive?" Eleanor came from the barn carrying feed. "He's 14. Too stubborn. Like somebody else I know." Martin ignored that. He scratched Rusty between the horns. The goat leaned into his hand. Eleanor asked, "Do you ever think about why he kept digging there?" "Roots." "You're sure?" "No. Could have smelled metal. Maybe. Could have smelled something in the box. After 22 years, goats are weird." "That is the first scientifically accurate thing you've said." They laughed. Neither believed Rusty somehow knew a missing girl's belongings were beneath him. There was no need for that. Animals investigated the world through smell, texture, movement, and appetite. Humans gave those actions meaning after the fact. Rusty dug because something beneath the soil interested him. Martin paid attention because the goat would not stop. The lunchbox carried the meaning. Years later, Diane Bennett wrote Martin a Christmas card. They had never become close, but she sent one every year after the case ended. That year, she added a note. "I used to hate people saying the goat found Laura because he didn't. Then I realized what they really mean. He helped us find the road back to her. I can live with that." Martin kept the card. He understood. Laura had not been waiting beneath the school. She had been miles away. The goat had no idea. But for 22 years, the investigation had moved farther and farther from Willow Creek Elementary as each promising lead failed. Rusty returned attention to the one place everyone believed had already given up all its secrets. The schoolyard, a patch of dirt, a child's hidden box. Sometimes the most important evidence is not somewhere nobody has ever searched. Sometimes it is somewhere everyone stopped looking. When Willow Creek Elementary was gone, the county converted part of the property into a small public park. The baseball field remained, new trees were planted, the old playground was removed. Near the rear fence stood a simple bench dedicated to Laura Bennett. Diane chose the inscription. It did not mention Thomas. It did not mention the case. It did not mention Rusty. It read, "For Laura, forever 11, forever loved." One spring morning, Martin sat there alone. Children played farther down the field. A dog chased a ball. Cars passed along the county road. The place no longer looked like the school he remembered. That seemed right. Across the fence, Eleanor's pasture remained. 2 goats grazed near the trees. Rusty was gone by then. He had died peacefully the previous winter. Martin had attended when Eleanor buried him behind the barn. He had not admitted how much the animal mattered to him. He did not need to. Sitting beside Laura's bench, Martin looked toward the patch of ground where the lunchbox had once been hidden. There was nothing unusual there, just grass. For decades, people had walked over that ground without knowing what rested inches beneath their feet. Then one stubborn goat decided that particular patch was worth disturbing. He dug once. Martin filled it. He dug again. Martin filled it again. He kept returning until Martin finally stopped treating the behavior as a nuisance and looked closely at what the animal was uncovering. Martin often thought that was the most honest version of the story. Rusty did not know there was a mystery. He did not know a child had disappeared. He did not know what a lunchbox was. He certainly did not understand that a faded name written underneath it would make an old detective reopen a file that had been sitting unsolved for 22 years. He only knew there was something beneath the ground that interested him, and sometimes that is enough, because mysteries do not always end when somebody discovers the whole truth at once. Sometimes they begin to end when one ordinary thing is moved a few inches, a little dirt, a metal corner, a faded name, and one person finally decides to keep digging.